Hello world, welcome to the podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by 3 Moons. They make beautiful home decor, including candles and wall hangings, and the amount of detail that's in them is exquisite. The time, the patience that it would take to make one of these, anything that they have. Speaking of the candles, I've said it before, I have them burning all the time in my house, in the studio, wherever I go. There's usually something that's scent related from 3 Moons. They're incredible. Do yourself a favour, get onto 3 Moons on Facebook. That's numeral 3 Moons. Also on Instagram, and check out the Spotify store. Anyway, today on the podcast we had Ryan Maher. Ryan's a ex-professional motocross rider. He was sponsored by Honda and Yamaha at different times during his career. And he shared with us a few injuries that he's sustained along the ways. I hope you enjoy. To start with, I'll just get you to introduce yourself and what you do and what you used to do mainly.
Yeah. So my name's Ryan Maher. Used to be a professional motocrosser. Started when I was 4 years old. Went all the way up till I was, I'm going to say 20, 21. Then sort of tapered off from there. The drinking got involved and got graded professional for it in Australia. So at least made it to that point. Basically went into the workforce and moved out to Roma, where I met my wife, or now wife, and started working for the oil and gas company that we both used to work for. And working a roster like that, racing sort of doesn't exist anymore. At the start we were 2 weeks on, 1 week off, so I'd see one weekend. So racing was completely off the cards then. So, but yeah, that's about my nutshell of what I started with. Pretty much my whole life has been racing, and I guess always will be. I don't know fuck all about motocross. Just getting that out there straight up. With motocross, is it seasonal? It is. So you have a motocross season, and at the end of the year they have a supercross season, which supercross was never my thing. I always got hurt trying to do that, so I left it. What's the difference? So supercross is indoor, bigger jumps, sharper jumps, less margin for error. So if you put motocross tracks basically wide open, big flowing tracks, supercross is like in an arena, basically big tight jumps that if you case or over jump something, you're more than likely going to a hospital for some sort of a broken bone. So they're more of the stuff that I wasn't into. I'd never got pushed into supercross, I was always a motocross sort of person. But first, say 7 months or 8 months of the year is all motocross, and the last half is all supercross, then just starts again from the next year all the way through. So motocross is faster? Motocross is much faster, yes. Much faster, but supercross has a lot more risk involved in it. Yeah, I'm getting that from the jumps. Yeah, yes. Which jumping was never worried me. Like I still didn't, jumps were the thing that I love the most, and up until lately that I don't like jumps, but that's a different story. But yeah, we'll get to it. We'll get to that. But yeah, jumping was never a thing that scared me. Like there's a jump at a track out at Conondale that it's called Drunks Hill. It's actually 2 jumps in one. So it's the first jump's only probably like, I'd say 20, 30 foot. And then where you land, if you really want to do it, it's like 130. And I did that at a riding school one day. I was just talking to the bloke, and he's like, "Oh, we'll send him in for lunch." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to stay here and have a hit of this jump." He's like, "You sure?" I'm like, "Yeah, it'll be right. I'll do a couple of test ones, just jump a little bit further, and I'll hit it." So he's like, "Oh, I'll sit here for the first couple and watch this, so no, someone's out here." I'm like, "Yeah, righto." So I've gone around, had a look at it as I was taking off. I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's about so much speed." With racing so much, you gauge how fast you've got to hit things. So I was like, "Yeah, that's probably about that." I'm like, "Oh, I'll go up, I'll half commit, and I'll chop at the top and just jump 3/4 away." So done that, rolled around, did it as like an S-bend before it, and as I come out of the S-bend, I started hammering it, and come to the upper ramp, and just completely forgot to back off. So first hit of it, she's gone, and jumped the whole 135 foot, come back up, and he goes, well, what happened to just half jump? And I'm like, oh, I completely forgot to back off.
You done the first one, didn't you?
No, like I'd been riding around all day, but I hadn't thought about jumping that far. So I was just like, and just completely forgot to back off. And basically, that's how my whole career started. Like I got an older brother that races, so he was always the one so he's 2 years older than me. He was always ahead of me. So even as a kid, like I started when I was 4, so he'd already had a year and a bit more than me of riding. So
And you're trying to catch him.
And I was trying to catch him, and it was always the battle, and it would always be the battle that he's always faster. So when it come to things, I was always the one to give it a chop first. So Dad would go, righto, Trent, go do this. And he'd pussyfoot around it because him and jumps were never a good thing. So he goes, Trent, give her a chop. So he's at this stage, so he would have been on a 65 and I would have been on a 50. So some of the stories I can remember that have been told of, they used to, when we lived in Lismore, we had a private track we went to that had like a gully jump, and it was literally just a gully with a little lip on one side to jump across. And Dad's like, Trent, jump it. And he's, nah. And I'm just sitting there just rolling around going through it, and I hear him going, try it. And me and my little head's gone, I can do this.
I can fucking do that.
So Dad goes, all he heard was he stopped Trent, and he's like, you need to do this. All he could hear is me go, just hit it. And I was never going to make it on a 50. It was never a shot in hell of doing it. And he goes, all I could hear was I've turned around and I've just seen you clip the back end of it and end for end it. And he comes running over. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, just trying to jump. And he goes,
fucking try it. That's what I'm doing.
You were never going to make it. I'm like, well, I was going to give it a chop. And he goes, well, good on you for having a chop, but next time don't try it. And my
get a faster bike.
That's it. Most of my career was always like that. If he didn't try it, I'd always try it, and 90% of the time I was always the one that ended up getting carried off the track. I've visited my fair share of hospitals. There's not many tracks that I haven't been to that I've not visited the hospital. So
fuck yeah.
I had more concussions than you're safely meant to have in a lifetime. But
how many is that? 1, 2?
Yeah, proper concussions so knockouts you're allowed. I'm pretty sure they're not so bad, but it's the concussions that you don't wake up from straight away that you can't recall.
Oh yeah.
I've had that I can remember. I'm pretty sure I've had 2 or 3 of them. So I've had one that I got knocked out on the track.
So they're the ones that cause all the brain damage and
Correct.
injuries later on in life.
Correct. Like I've got things now that I can't do that I used to be able to. Like
really?
I can't close. If I was to close my eyes, I can only close my right one, and if I go to close my left, I can't keep my right open. It closes both. I can only wink with one eye. It's
really,
yeah. I got mad shit happens from that, and like I have never had it investigated, but I've had headaches for the past.
You probably should.
I probably should. I've had headaches for probably the last 5 years, just constant, and just can't figure out what they're from. I can probably guess what they're from.
You gone to a doctor about a headache?
I've seen doctors, like proper doctors, and they can't figure it out.
You get a brain scan?
Yep. I've had lots of different things and they can't figure it out. And to the point where I'm basically going down the alternate route where it's not a professional that's done a 17-year-long course to tell me what I'd do and don't have going on. Like I've had episodes put in hospital, not being able to keep food down, and doctors go, no, you're sweet, send you home.
Because you headache.
Well, from everything. They just accommodating to everything. Like at some stage, like later on in life, I ended up with partial epilepsy and they couldn't figure out why. I was just having random seizures. And like...
You think that's due to the crashing?
Probably.
Yeah.
I reckon, because by this stage of my life, I'd had some of my biggest ones. So one of my biggest I've had, which I feel sorry for my parents, what they've seen me go through. I had a crash at an MX Nationals where I actually was straight off the start. So I'd whole shot against 40 people and got hit right at the, like 3/4 way down a straight.
Yeah.
So basically, if you've ever seen a race, you got 40 people going into a corner that's probably wide enough for 10.
Yeah, yeah. That's where all the good crashes are.
So I had my biggest one, probably not my biggest, but the one that's done the most damage to me was off that. So I got a good start and I was in front and I can't remember any of it. So this is where one of my first big concussions come from. I actually got a good start because my dad was on the start line.
Right. And
I come across in and someone's just come the other side and just straight cleaned me out. So I'm in front of 40 other people in a cloud of dust.
And they ran over you.
So no one could see me.
Everyone ran over you.
So I got run over by, from what...
Everyone.
Yeah, from what I can recall from tyre marks and what my dad can tell me from people hitting me, I got hit by about run over by about 8 bikes, 8 different bikes. So from that, that's probably one of the biggest ones. I basically got hit.
Did you break anything?
I didn't break anything because I was completely unconscious.
Yeah, righto.
So that's
just limp goal on the ground.
Yeah, because what he recalls from that, he goes, all I seen was you get hit, and he goes, I could just see your bike. It was shit because the bike just rolled off to the side.
No, of course it did.
No one hit the bike. Me, I'm right in the middle of everyone. So the old man reckons all he could see was just my arms and legs and body parts just flailing as people were just running over the top of me. So you can imagine the shit that my parents have been through, and that's probably the biggest one I've had. And he was there firsthand to witness me do it. Or it happened. He was standing there watching. So he would have been like,
fuck yeah,
30 metres away from me. So
Holy
I've put him and my mother through a lot of shit.
How old were you when you done that?
So that one I want to say 17 or 18.
And that was your first massive concussion type injury?
That was probably the second one, but that was the biggest one. So my first one, I got hit and got knocked out, and then got up and kept riding and had another big crash, and I woke up just before that crash and got knocked out again. So that was my first one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the second one was the worst one because I actually got hit, got run over. Because there's photos of it from, because it was a national. I was just off on a stretcher, and they've literally strapped me to a stretcher, and I did not move. They didn't, my old man didn't know if I was alive, or I was dead, nothing, didn't move. And with the nationals, they're pretty good. They have like a full-blown race-safe truck that they can perform minor surgeries in.
Yeah, right.
So if they have to, like they have before, revive people on a track and done emergency surgery to revive people from that thing. So it's good. Like you pay a hefty amount to have them there, but it's good for you.
Probably worth it.
Definitely. So I got taken into there. My old man wasn't allowed in. Wasn't even conscious. They said I was awake, but all I was making was groaning noises. So they couldn't get nothing out of me. The only reason I know all this is because one of the ladies that was actually in there working on me is a family friend of ours, and she was the one answering everyone's questions. They didn't know who the fuck I was. They're like, she's like, is this name, his parents, his dad's out there, so on and so on. I actually didn't wake up from that until an hour and a half later, till I was in Nambour Hospital, is when I physically remember anything.
What they do when you wake up? Did they start scanning you or anything like that?
So I had a mad drama with that place. So that was in Nambour Hospital. So Nambour was a great place. So So when I actually came to, I had a doctor arguing with me because I was a motocrosser. Yeah. And he obviously had it out for motocrossers. And he basically nearly refused to believe anything I said.
Really?
And at this stage, I couldn't feel my legs. So I found out eventually, like, once I got discharged and everything, like, I had swelling on my spine and had no feeling from my waist down. So from, like, basically my belly button down, I had no feeling of my legs.
So this guy wouldn't believe you after being run over by a motorbike, eight different motorbikes. He didn't believe you that...
And got transported by an ambulance strapped to a bed because it still couldn't talk or anything.
He didn't believe you?
No. So there's a long story in that. Like, I knew it was there. Like, I didn't know, knew something wasn't right.
Right.
And, like, they wouldn't believe me, and, like, they discharged me to go home because, again, they didn't really want to do it, and they didn't believe me that I couldn't walk. And I was like, Jim, I'll prove it to you then. He's like, what do you mean I'll prove it to you? I'm like, fuck, I'll prove it to you. Oh, man. I said to Dad, come here. I'm like, guess what? I'm like, help sit me up, put my legs over. I'm like, you're going to have to hold me because I'm like, I can't feel my legs. You know I can't feel my legs. I'm just going to push myself off this bed.
And you just went flat.
Yeah, I'm like, you're going to have to hold me. And basically did that. Just whoop, doom, and he held me. And they're like, okay, we'll get you a wheelchair.
Yeah, right.
So then they got me a wheelchair. And then slowly but surely, I, like a week or 2 weeks, I think it's 2 weeks later, I got feeling in my left leg, but my right leg still didn't work.
What's that feel like when you start getting feeling back in a leg after not being able to?
It was odd and it fucking hurt.
Yeah?
Like more probably the nerve pain than anything.
So we're talking like pins and needles?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Just on a massive level?
Yeah. So then, and like the right one, nothing. So I could by that time I could actually walk on crutches because that leg I had enough feeling to walk.
So by feeling, Is this like you can't move them?
I was able to move that leg, but it still hurt that much because
You
obviously
didn't want to.
yeah, it obviously still had that much swelling around my I didn't know I had swelling around my spine. They didn't tell me this when they let me out.
Did they tell your parents or
No, they didn't tell us anything.
did they know?
No, probably not. I don't trust hospitals at all anymore.
I can see why.
So I got that feeling back, and like even to get in and out of the shower, like I could get myself in, but then to get my leg that I couldn't feel, I literally had to lift my leg into the shower. And like I ended up having to, at 18 years old, nearly have my mother put me into a shower, which people that do have spinal injuries that wouldn't worry them because there's nothing they can do. But for me, I was like, this is not normal. Like my mother shouldn't be putting me in the fucking shower. But
No.
so from that, I sort of nothing really got any traction with my leg, and like they couldn't tell me why. So I had a chiropractor that worked on a lot of motocrosses that I actually went to see when I was younger because I'd snapped my collarbone and couldn't lift my arm above 90 degrees, and it was just like my shoulder socket had pulled so far apart when I did my collarbone that once it healed I couldn't lift it up. And I just happened to go with Mum when I was younger, and she was getting stuff done, and we just happened to talk to him about it, and he's like, oh, I could probably fix that. He's like, just lay down the bed for me. I'm like, okay. When I'm 15, I actually and his whole nearly reefed me off the bed and popped my shoulder. Got up, and all of a sudden I could reach all the way out to the back of my other side shoulder. And I was like, this is pretty fucking wild. Like, how do you do this? So my thing was once I got enough feeling back that, and they said there's nothing wrong, you're just gonna have to figure it out now. I called him and I said, this is what's happened. I need to, and like I had pains all over my body, like my hips were sore, my knees were sore, like even the one that I had feeling back, my knee was like excruciating pain, like even when I bent it.
But you got run over by 8 motorbikes.
Yeah, I actually had one go straight across I actually had tire marks that went straight across the back of my neck, so I was face down, it rode across the top of my head. And then I actually had a burn.
Did anyone apologise to you?
No one would have known. But I had a burnout mark on the side where someone actually got stuck on me and literally just tore my jersey off me and just had a burnout mark the whole way down the side of my right side.
Fuck yeah.
So they got me good. So yeah, like my parents contacted this chiropractor and said, he's in a bad way. Can you just have a look at him? And like, yeah, bring him in. So like at this stage, I'm still on crutches and basically just dragging my leg behind me. So I come in, we've explained it to him, we've given him the doctor's reports, and they've said, like, been run over, one ran across my neck, so on. But they didn't check it. They did a couple of scans, like, yeah, you're right. By the time he finished with me, he had an A4 sheet of paper of all the bones I had displaced. So the reason my legs were so sore is I actually had my tibia and fibula displaced. One was pushed across and down into my ankle, so I couldn't move my ankle. Other was pushed across and up into my kneecap, which pushed my kneecap off to the side, which is why my leg wouldn't bend properly. I had 2 displaced hips. I had both my shoulders were rotated like backwards. And basically, by the time I finished, I had an A4 piece of paper of the shit that I had displaced and what I'd done to myself. I actually ended up walking out of his thing with feeling back in the other leg and being able to walk, because what had happened is I'd compressed so much shit around my spine that it was just so compressed and swollen there that's why I had no feeling in my leg. And it was never going to get any better because it was all just compressed. So by the time he finished and straightened me all out and put everything back, I had feeling back in my leg again. I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? And at the end of it, he was talking to us, and at the end, like he was never a serious dude. And at the end, he sat me and my mum down. He's like, in all seriousness, you need to reconsider what you're doing with your life. Oh, what's that? He goes, it says here that you got run over by multiple people. I'm like, yeah. He goes, did someone run over your head or neck? I'm like, yeah, they went straight across like my shoulder blades across my neck. He goes, were you conscious for any of this? He's like, no. I'm like, no, I was completely out cold. He goes, be thankful and cherish every day. He goes, if you're alive, you're dead right now because you would have severed your spinal cord. He goes, because you were limp, it just pushed into the ground and flexed back. He goes, if you were awake and conscious, you'd be dead.
Yeah, you hear that
I was like,
a lot.
I was like,
That's
okay.
mental.
But even with that, I was 18 and didn't faze me. I kept racing. I raced for another 2 or 3 years professionally at it.
So you were sponsored, you're talking professional, you were sponsored?
Correct. I up until the age of 18, probably from about, I think, 8 till 18, so 10-year gap, I had bikes given to me. I basically just rode for people. At that time, it was just race plans. So they'd give you a bike at the start of the year, you'd race it, give it back, get a new one for the next year, and just do that. So
what do they do with the whole bike?
they sell them. They sell them as race plan bikes.
Right,
So they basically, the dealership, so Honda, I race for Honda, I race for Yamaha, and I think that was the only two that I actually ended up racing for that gave me bikes. But they give a certain amount of bikes a year leeway for race plan, so they can choose who they give them to. But they have to cop the cost of what they sell them for. So what we did is, because I have all my own personal sponsors with wheels and exhaust and everything, that when I gave them back completely as I raced it.
Yeah, righto.
So mine would have had four extra grand's worth of accessories on it, and they're selling it for half the price of what a new one is. So someone that goes in, they're like, brand new bike, ooh, one that's got fucking lots of shit on it, they're going to buy them. So that was how we managed to keep our deal going for so long, is because ours went back looking 10 times better than what you would buy it brand new. And it's been raced for a year, wouldn't have even done 100 hours, but serviced by someone.
Pretty hard hours though.
But you think about it, like you got us, we rebuild bikes every 10 hours.
Yeah.
So it was never like it was to the point of where it was going to destroy itself.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had them all the way up to basically till I was 18, and then the whole motocross industry sort of shit itself. And
what
then
happened there?
Or just no one was giving bikes out, no one was giving anything. So like at the present moment, motorcycling in Australia is fucking dog shit.
Really?
Yeah, there is no money in it. Like back when I first turned senior at 16, you could win an event and I'd earn more money on a Sunday than I would work on a full week as an apprentice.
Really?
So like I was earning, even an apprentice, I was only earning like $300-400 a week, but I was making more money racing of a weekend. That's putting cost of racing in there and getting there. I was still earning more money racing, and now
what's happened there? Why is there no interest in it, or
there's still plenty of interest, but just no one wants to outlay the money now. Like Supercross was nothing here for a long time, and there's a new couple of dudes doing it now. It's just started getting big again. But like even motorcycling in Australia, they just
did you bring you?
They just don't want to do it anymore. Like it's a shame. Like it's a family sport. Like all my friends that I have now, I've got no one from school. Like I hated school. I never went to it. I dropped out in year 10. But I've probably got one person that I ever went to school with that I actually talk to now. The rest are all from racing. And like I haven't seen a lot of them for a lot of years, but I can see them on a weekend riding a track, and it's like I never left off. Like it was just like a family.
That sounds really disappointing then.
It is, and like it's to the point now where all the way up until I was probably 16 or 17, racing was fun as.
Yeah.
Turn up, race, shit happens. Now it's got to the point where kids at the age of like 6 are on training regimes. They ride 5 days a week and then race the weekend. They're on a restricting, they're homeschooled, they don't do anything. Like I hated school, but I still went. And then I raced for the weekend, and that was it. And like you had a big, massive family that like you'd go there, and there'd be like 8 different families camped together. It was just like a big family. Now everyone's so disjointed that no one's friends. Everyone hates each other, and it's all just a big competition now. So it's
for kids.
Fuck
that.
It's shit. Yeah, I want to get my daughters into it, but I doubt they'll ever take them racing. It's just shit now. I'll teach them how to ride, and we'll go riding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I doubt I'll take them racing.
Is that just in Queensland, or is that?
It's Australia wide.
Yeah.
It's just shit now, completely. Queensland used to be probably the biggest place to race in Australia for anyone. Like you'd have people from North Queensland coming, you'd have people from New South Wales coming in to do our series, and you'd be having so your gate's got 40 people on it. You'd actually have like 2 heats of 40 people in a race, and you'd have you got classes from age of 5 to 50, and now they struggle to even get 100 riders total.
Yeah, right.
Back then, you were struggling to
who brought about implemented all these new regulations?
Well, no, it's just how it's turned. It's just everyone's
so it's just a cultural type thing.
Everyone's just gotten so competitive in it because they want to be the next Chad Reed. But Problem is, Chad Reed did it in a time when there was none of that. So that's
Yeah.
why he is the unicorn of motorcycle racing from Australia.
Yeah.
There's just too many people in it now to even try and do that. And like to go to America to race, like them over there, and it's probably why we do it here now, is they are so strict on their racing. They are born and bred racing. They race. All the people that are now professional in the world stage were homeschooled, raced every day, rode every day.
That.
And a lot of them, you look at a lot of them can't, like Chad Reed couldn't read and write
Yeah.
because he left school at grade 8 and
You don't need
Raced.
to read and write to ride a motorbike.
exactly. So it's a shame, but
Do you think there'd be like some sort of social class?
well, that you'd think so, but they
Because I know in the car scene, I know you can get very, very competitive.
Oh, yeah.
But there's also things like social clubs and gymkhana.
Yeah.
Gymkhana, carnacross.
yeah,
Things like that you can just show up and thrash around the Hyundai XL and
that's it. Yeah,
give a crap.
and like
about
there's
that.
probably in motorcycle, like in motocross, there's probably one event now, and it's only this year would have been the third year, but it's been shit canned because of coronavirus. It's
Fucking corona.
it's Red Bull Day in the Dirt.
Yeah.
And they literally the same thing. Turns up, the big piss up, you race. They have like, you can race whatever you want. Like there's people there doing like, they were doing drags the first year, and there's people there on Harleys with knobby tyres on it
Yeah,
doing
that's
drag
a go.
races on that. And like, that's the only thing in Australia that is like that.
Yeah, right.
One event. Everything else, racing.
Yeah,
There's
right.
nowhere else you can go socialise with a heap of friends and have a whole heap of fun other than Red Bull Day in the Dirt.
Yeah, well, it seems like there definitely needs to be something more social.
Oh, definitely.
Definitely more social.
Like I'll never go
And
back
also
to racing.
cost of prohibitive, because I
Yeah.
can imagine that racing would be a cheap
No.
way to spend money.
No, so
Spend
like
your time, rather.
to even first off even go racing, if you were to do any sort of race that's governed by Motorcycling Australia, you have to have a Motorcycling Australia race license, which is $300 a year,
Yeah.
and that's no good for anything else. It literally is good to ride your motorbike.
Yeah,
it costs you
right.
$300 a year without
So it's
fail.
just like a registration fee.
Correct.
Yeah.
And for some of us, it's to keep our number. Like we all get professional numbers. Like I had number 30 before I stopped racing, and that's all I basically was paying was $300 a year to have a number on my bike. And now I'm at the point where I still run that number. I don't have it, but I'm still going to run it. I don't care. I don't race it. So if someone has a problem with it, I don't really care. But it's, just to even race a club day, which is is supposed to be a social thing, costs you $300 a year for a license to do that. And then it costs you, so you got to get memberships for a track. So each track makes you, basically, if you want to do a club day, get a membership, which is $50 a year. And then
For that one.
for that one club, and like there is multiple clubs all over Australia. And then to race the day, it's usually like $35 a class. And if you race 3 classes, you can imagine what that adds up to. And you get, each race is probably like 10, 15 minutes, and you get 3 in one class. You get 3 races a day. So basically, to race that,
That's getting real expensive without equipment at all.
exactly.
Like, you're not even on a motorbike yet. And
Nope. You haven't paid to drive yourself there. You haven't paid the upkeep on fixing your bike. You haven't paid for the fuel to get you there and to race the bike with the fuel. It's not cheap.
Jesus.
And I'm very lucky that I had my sponsors for so long. Like my parents they outlaid all the money to get me to and from the track and paid my entries up until I was 18, I think. I was 16. I think I was 16 when I turned senior. But if I didn't have that support from manufacturers, from my external sponsors, I never would have made it that long in that career. It's not feasible.
That seems crazy, because like things like, junior football, same thing. Up until you're 16, you pay your registration fee at the start and you play all year.
Yep.
And that's it. Like, you're done.
Yeah. See, we had the choice too, like me and my brother when we started, is we were both in soccer. Like I started soccer at the same time I started racing, and it come to a point where we chose.
You had to.
We both chose motocross.
Yeah,
but
well, definitely you would. It's more fun.
exactly. And like I'm not a real good team sport player. I get too angry at people. It's not real good. I played at school and didn't end well, so we chose motocross, and I wouldn't change it for the world. Like I've got friends for life from that, and like it may have taken a lot of things from me It's cost me a lot of money in injuries and to do it.
Yeah, but imagine if you didn't do anything.
Oh, exactly. I wouldn't.
You're fucking bored.
Exactly. I wouldn't have met my
boring
wife. I met my wife through racing. She used to race.
Yeah, right.
Her parents owned a bike shop in Roma. Like, I never would have met her
Yeah.
if I didn't race. So I can't.
No regrets.
No regrets at all.
So why did you stop? What made you?
Having a family sort of slowed me up a lot.
Yeah.
For me, like, even when I met my wife,
So you just couldn't be competitive with the time.
Well, I could, but it was more the fact of I started second guessing myself on things. Like, my whole way through my racing career, as I said when I was younger, I just did and thought about it afterwards.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it cost me dearly.
And then you started thinking about it first.
I had a family, so I had to think about it because, like, I'd already had this before I met my wife. I had this first back injury, so that put a lot of things in perspective. Put me down a dark road to start with the recovery, and I wasn't able to ride, so I turned to drinking and other things when I was that age, and put me in a bad place and come back to racing. And it sort of showed me that racing was something that kept me grounded. And even as a kid, it kept me out of trouble. Like, I knew at Friday afternoon, I was going racing, and I was home Sunday night, and I was back to school Monday. So I didn't have time to get in.
Around.
Exactly. I didn't have the time to get into shit that normal school kids do. Not saying that all school kids get into bad shit, but when you got nothing to do, your mind wanders. And like, mine was school, racing, and that was it all the way until I left school. But I started thinking a lot more of the repercussions of things, and it didn't stop me from racing, but it took me out of the competitive part of where I was at. Like, I couldn't race at my full potential because I was always second guessing. If I crash, how do I provide for my family? And like, at that time, I was the sole provider of my family.
Yeah.
And my wife was working, but I see myself as the main provider. And I thought to myself, if I get hurt, my wife's still working, but we can't live on just that wage alone.
Yeah.
And like, at this stage, she stopped racing. So she stopped when after I met her, because she started traveling with my racing, because I was still at that stage still trying to get graded to pro. And I got graded to pro when I was with her. And it all just come to a head, and I just couldn't do it. And then we moved out to Roma, and it was a lot harder for us to go racing because Roma from any tracks was minimum 6 hours. So I'd finish work on a like, most of my racing was on Sundays at this stage when I was senior. And like, I was working for her parents at the bike shop, so they were leaning into shit with where when I could go.
Yeah.
But like, I'd finish, I'd load everyone in the car, and I'd drive 6 hours, and then I'd drive home and go to work. And it just wasn't working for us. So
Definitely not. That's
ended up much. And it was costing me too much money to do it. Like, we were struggling to live, but I still had the dream of racing, and it got to a point where I just had to rein it in. And
how old were you at this stage?
I was, I'd say 21 or 22.
Yeah, wow, that must have been hard.
Yeah, I didn't know anything else. Like, I did an apprenticeship, so I became a qualified cabinet maker. Worked for myself, had all that sort of shit, and it just didn't give me the rush racing did. So I chased that, and I was getting nowhere with what I was doing. Like, I'd stop cabinet making because I was working too many hours, and they wanted me to work weekends, and I was like, fuck, I'm not working weekends. Weekends are my time to ride. So I ditched that once I finished it, and all I wanted was a 9 to 5 job. That was Monday to Friday, and that was it. But at me coming to learn, you can't survive with a family of 3, or family of 2, sorry, I had 2 kids at that time. You couldn't live on just that wage. So that's when I ended up looking into working in the oil and gas industry. And as you know, you work when your roster says, and if it falls when racing is, that's too fucking bad. So
go home and stay there then.
Basically. So that's basically when I hung the boots up and didn't actually ride for a long time after that. I actually ended up selling my bike, and I probably didn't ride for 9 months, and that was the longest I'd ever not ridden a bike other than injuring myself. That was the first time I'd gone that long of choosing not to ride, and it was probably the weirdest 9 months of my life. Come to a weekend, I'm like, what the fuck do I do now? Like, I don't know anything else. I'm like, what do I do? So I ended up going down started drinking again, and that never ended well. So
no, it doesn't.
No, so I and basically just led to we weren't doing a great deal. I was not in a great place because I'd finish work and then sit at home for a week because I didn't have anything else to do. Like, I got to hang out with my family. Like, that was the best times ever. I still got a whole week with my wife and my 2 kids at the time, and it was great. I loved it, but I had nothing that drove me. Nothing to drive me to do anything. Like, I didn't want to build anything. I was well over doing anything construction wise. It was just, I hated it at that time. I was just like, nah, I'm not doing it. So I basically just sat around the house, did nothing.
Yeah.
And
got fat.
Yeah. So
fucked.
Yeah, it was no good at all. So yeah, then I ended up buying another bike and building it, and this is where the real good story that you know about comes along.
Yeah, this is the one I was just about to ask you about.
So I bought another bike off the in-laws that they had sitting there. It was just a old 01 RM125, and I'm like, I've still at this stage I hadn't raced in a long time, and I still had all my personal sponsors, so I could still build a bike, and it cost me nothing.
Yeah.
So I got this bike. I paid $1,000 for it. Ran, it was sweet. Old bud said it was his son's. I found out later down the track there was a lot more story to it. Once I actually hurt myself, I'll tell it when I get there.
Yep.
It would fucking sketch me out. But so I got the bike, and I was just so amped to ride this thing that I just started rushing into doing shit. Like, I rebuilt it, I did all this stuff to it, and I just cut so many corners to the point, not that I meant to, I was just that excited to do stuff. I just didn't build it as meticulous as some of the other ones I've built. And I actually, one day, like, I was on my 3-week break at this time, and I was like, nah, it's good enough, I'm going riding. And
so was it completed, or like what? How built are we talking?
Well, it was completely together, ran perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I should have bled brakes. I should have rode around my house. I should have just ridden it on a flat first.
So this is your test run you're talking about.
So I basically went up and down my backyard 3 times to make sure it actually ran, and I went straight to a track.
Yeah.
Straight to a private track at this stage. And like, I haven't ridden in 9 months. So I thought, it's 9 months. I've done this before.
It's like riding a bike.
Exactly. So I'm like, it's sweet. And I'd gone out, I'd done 2 laps, and it felt odd to me. Like, when I jump it just didn't feel right. And I'm like, it's just me not.
Yeah, no, right there is when you should have
put it in.
Hindsight's great, though.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? So I'm like, I'll go and make a couple of changes. I went in, moved my handlebars and stuff. I'm like, I'm good. So I went back out. And in that lap, I come round and I come out of a corner to do probably one of the smallest jumps of my career that has hurt me. And I just come out of a corner to do a double and clicked a gear on the mid section of the up ramp and hit false neutral. So with that, I've got no drive off the up ramp. I have nose cased the the top side of the down ramp. And with that, I'm still connecting the bike at this stage. So it's blown my hands off. So my hands aren't on the handlebars. And it's preloaded in, and the suspension's recoiled and thrown me headfirst into the ground. And with this, because my feet were still basically connected to the bike's momentum kept going, but my head and front part of my body was stationary on the ground at this stage. So it's folded me completely in half the wrong way, to the point where my boots touch the backside of my helmet. So I've had scrape marks at the back of my helmet from my boots.
Scorpion
properly.
Yep.
And from there, it just bounced. And like, I don't forget the whole, like, I can remember it, but I can't detail remember what happened. But all I can remember is going over the handlebars, hit the ground, and then just laying there.
Yeah, but you were awake for all of it.
I was awake for all of it.
For this one?
For this one, yeah. And I had the dude that I was riding at his house come over to me, and he's like, "You right?" I'm like, I'm not really sure at the moment. I'm just going to lay here for a little bit. And he's come over and sat with me, and I'm like, I'm not sure what's going on. I'm like, we'll play it cool. I'll just lay here a bit. I ended up getting him to help me up to sit on my ass, and I'm like, yeah, something's not right here. I'm like, something's hurting bad. I'm like, he's like, I'll help you up into the car and we'll ride over to the house and we'll get undressed. So he put me in the car, drove me over to his house. He brought my bike and everything over, and I was sitting there, and I was just sitting on a chair, and I just, in a complete daze, I didn't know what was going on. He's like, "You right?" I'm like, "I don't know." I'm like, "But it was only just down, like, it was only like 5 minutes down the road from my house." So I'm like, "I'll just go home." I'm like, I'll just pack her up and we'll go home. I'm like, I'm stiff as shit. Like, I couldn't bend. Like, I was just like a board. Like, I had to turn my whole body. And So he loaded my bike in the trailer. I got in my car, and I literally got in my car and sat. And I moved my chair all the way back to my hands were fully locked out, and that's how I drove home, just stiff armed all the way back with my head basically planted on the back of the chair. And I just
because you couldn't bend or move or
couldn't
anything.
move, bend, nothing. Like I was like something's going to drift. Like I've possibly done internal damage to something. Like
How'd you feel, like pain wise?
I was fucking excruciating.
Yeah.
And like but I was like, I'm just going to go home.
Is it like just everywhere?
Yeah,
or
because I didn't know what was going on. My whole body was hot. I had no fucking idea what was going on. So I'm like,
yeah, that would have freaked me out.
Previous experience, this ain't fucking good. So I'm just going home.
Yeah.
So I'm just driving home. I'm just cruising. Like I could only do like 40, 50k an hour.
Could you see?
Yeah. I'm going to say yes because my wife listened to it.
Yeah.
I could see perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So I drove all the way home, and I got home and I just drove straight in the driveway and just parked straight at the front stairs and called my wife, and I said, something's not right. I walked myself up the stairs and...
Fucking plane.
Inconsiderate.
Sorry, yeah.
So I walked myself up my stairs and sat on my lounge, and like I actually literally sat on the edge of it and I couldn't move. I'm like, something's not right. I'm like, this is it. And she's like, at this stage, she's at home with my, I want to say they were 2. Yeah, they'd be 2, would have been 2 years old. 2-year-old twin daughters, trying to feed them dinner. Right at dinner time, it's going dark. I'm like, something's not right.
So you haven't gone to the hospital yet?
No, I just drove home. So she's like, I'm like, something's not right. So she's called her mother. I can't really recall much of it, but I'm pretty sure her parents came and got the kids to look after them. She put me in the car and drove me to hospital. By the time they got me to hospital, I couldn't move. So they had to lift me out of the car into a wheelchair and then wheeled me into the...
So what, your legs and everything?
Yeah, I just couldn't move at all. So they just wheeled me straight into the hospital in that stage. I knew something wasn't good again.
You reckon?
Yeah, so with that, I spent that night there. They ended up coming in, so my wife stayed with me. At this stage, I was in all sorts. I didn't know what was going on. Things were going through my head, like I fucked up here bad.
I gotta go to work in a week.
Yeah, no, it was 3 days off going to work. I did it on a Friday. I was flying out the Tuesday.
Oh yeah, that's
I'm like, oh fuck.
Yeah, that's good.
And at this stage, I was the only one working because I was flying flight worker. So my wife stayed at home with the kids. So I'm sole provider and I'm casual. So I'm sitting there going, fuck off, I've done nothing here. It's just bruising and I can just go home. It wasn't just bruising. I didn't even bruise anything other than my ego and my face from where I hit the ground. I actually ended up breaking, I shattered and compressed my T9 vertebra to the point of there was just a wedge sitting there. Ended up, they found a week later, this is why I don't like hospitals or doctors, they rolled me to check my breathing before discharging me, and I got a mad rush of pain. I couldn't breathe. And they rushed me back down to x-ray and found another bone broken in my back. So I ended up breaking T9 and L1. So I broke one right up near my rib cage and one right down the lower end of my spine. So at this stage, I was like, I fucked up bad here. And I don't know what I'm going to do here. So So I was bedridden for a while. I can't remember how long it was, but I was bedridden because the way that I actually broke my T9, it broke into a wedge shape, wedging straight towards my spinal cord. So they were worried that any sort of sharp, sudden movements was going to push that wedge straight into my spinal cord and sever my spinal cord.
Well, that sounds good.
So they were very hesitant to even let me out of the hospital. They were just
just going to keep you strapped to a bed or something.
They didn't even have me strapped down. They just had me that. I was allowed to get up and go to the toilet, which fucking shocked me. Something chronic. So I'd
broken back and they were letting you just walk around.
Correct.
Okay.
This is Roma Hospital. I don't like them. Anyway, so I was in there for, I want to say, I can't remember correctly. I think it was like a month they had me in hospital, completely drugged up on everything they could give me to stop the pain because the pain was crazy.
I could imagine.
So with that, they literally came in and said, "You've broken your back." Walked out. no prognosis of if I'm going to have surgery, if I'm going to lose feeling. Like at this stage, I still had feeling. I could feel everything. I could still move my feet, everything. It wasn't as bad as the first time because I didn't have any swelling. I had no internal damage at all. So like I hit the ground that hard and folded me that hard that I shattered one bone in my back or broke 2 bones in my back. Did not do any internal damage at all.
They just come in and tell you you've broken your back and then that's it.
Yeah. They're
like no one you can talk to about what that might mean because, you know, you'd say you broke your back and you're thinking wheelchair.
Exactly. That was all I thought was I'm in a wheelchair for the rest of my life now. Still had feeling, but a lot of these injuries, some people still do have feeling and then lose it. And I'm sitting there thinking, I don't know what I'm going to do here. And like at this stage, they told me right at the time their visiting hours shut. So I'm sitting in this hospital
by yourself,
by myself, thinking,
I'm done fucked up and now I'm in a wheelchair.
What do I do with my life now? I'm like, I had my apprenticeship, but that's building. I can't do that in a fucking wheelchair. I can't do that with no feeling. I'm like, so I had a lot of dark times in hospital, broke down a lot. My wife went through a lot of stuff with me around that time. And yeah, I just didn't know what to do. And like, they didn't tell me till probably, I think mid the next day what was happening. And they still didn't tell me if it was surgery or anything. They didn't know. Like that hospital was liaisoning with PA hospital, but they couldn't send me because they didn't know how unstable I was. So I was just sitting in a hospital waiting for them doctors to talk to Brisbane doctors to tell me what was going on. I had no fucking idea what was happening. And at this stage, I'm like, me and my wife I'm like, I don't know what to do with myself. And I got real bad depression from that and I still struggle with it to this day. Not to do with the injury, but just things that it put me through and things that I thought, the thoughts that I had, it put me in a real bad place. And it's not an easy thing to come back from. And like not even just the pain part of it, the financial pressure that put me in. I didn't work for, I want to say probably 3 months. So I had 3 months of
nothing,
absolutely nothing. My wife was doing I had no work. So the work I was at was really, really good. They kept my job for me. They told me I had a job when I come back and they meant it. They even put me in the office downstairs once I got clearance to actually get up and walk around. Like they were really good about it. Up until that stage, I was sitting at home with nothing. And like I had recently, like the year before, bought a brand new car. So I had a $60,000 car loan that was defaulting. I had to sell my bike I got rid of that bike. I didn't even actually keep it. I just sent it to my parents' house and said, do as you please with it. Burn it. I can do whatever you want. I don't want it. Up? Broke a back guard. Which I don't pay for.
Motherfucker.
There's all these injuries that do the most damage to me. Don't do anything to the bike. Fucking destroy myself. Bike's fucking good. But so I sent it down to them. They ended up selling it. I don't even know how much they got for it. I didn't even really care. I didn't want to know about it. I defaulted about $8,000 or $9,000 on my car loan, which I had to bring myself back out of. I had to sell my van that I'd set up for racing, which basically all I did was I sold that van.
I've seen photos of that van.
To live.
Very cool.
Yeah, I sold that van to live for those months. And even in that, I still had rent, I still had food, I still had power, I had all this stuff.
The bills don't stop coming.
No, and I got nothing. Like my parents helped where they could, but I was bad. Like I had the point where I wasn't even cleared to come back to work, and I told my wife I was going back being a builder, and she's like, "You're not." I'm like, I couldn't physically sit in a chair without having excruciating pain. And
so you're standing or what?
So I'd stand, I'd sit, I'd find anything that was comfortable enough to get through. Because like I was only allowed out of hospital once I could deal with the pain without medication. So they had me on Tarjan, which is a slow release endone. They had me on endones, and they had me on Panadol and Nurofen on like a cycle when I was in hospital. And
didn't touch it.
I had to get out of hospital. I had to go nothing. I was allowed Panadol, and Panadol for a headache, yeah, great.
Not
Panadol
really.
for a broken back, not real fucking good. So
holy crap! So what ended up happening? Like obviously you toughed it out and you got out of hospital, but I mean, did they cut you open eventually?
No surgery. So I basically sit here now with a very mushed T9 vertebra that'll just never be the same. It'll calcify and more than likely turn into arthritis one day. And
So that'll be eventually fused to the other vertebrae
possibly.
and
Yep.
cause you dramas,
Correct.
pain down the track.
So I've still got pain. I've lived in pain ever since I've done it. It just doesn't go away. Like I can't sit in a car for a long period of time without the pain. Like I sit in a chair, I have pains. If I sit for a long period of time, basically from the underside of my arse cheeks to middle out my back goes numb.
So this is so weird. Like all of the fucking things that they can do and they can't fix you back, really.
They reckon it was...
I understand that it's a very complicated bit of machinery, but like, so's your heart.
And they can do open heart surgery. They can pull it out and put it back in. So I still deal with that. And like the way I broke my L1, I actually broke the side off it. So it's just like a piece of bone floating around. And that's actually the one that gives me the most grief.
What, because it grinds up against
No,
other
so it's,
shit?
so it's just floating and it actually gets wedged between two other vertebrae. And you could be just walking along, boom, wedged between...
Did they give you the option of taking that out, or
They reckon the risk of having surgery would probably paralyse me more than what this
Really?
would. Yep. They reckon there was more risk of anything going wrong, cutting me up just to... Because there's nothing they could do with the T9 one. It was just... That's just how it is. So,
Yeah,
like,
it's-
so what
yeah.
I found out later on, once they actually started explaining shit to me, is in the case of me breaking my back, I've done the bone that you can live without. So T9 is actually connected to your sternum and rib cage. So you can live without your T9 vertebra. So that
it's
is
supported through other areas.
correct. So that's the only vertebra in your whole back that is supported by anything.
So you got lucky, if that's what you want to call it there.
Very lucky, because if I was one up or one down, for the damage that I did, I'd be paralysed.
Yeah,
and they
right.
told me that straight off, and it fucking scared the shit out of me. And
So
like,
the one in your lower back's the one that's...
it's the one that gives me
causing you
grease
grief.
because it actually just gets wedged between two things. And the only way of getting it out is just deal through the pain until it works its way back out again.
That sounds fucked.
It's fucking horrible. You can imagine just walking along having a great old day and then just a piece of thing you get nerve pain in your back and you get a spasm in your back and you think that's painful. And then when you have this bone just jam itself in there and just doesn't come out. So like at least with a spasm, you get a spasm, it goes away. This spasm doesn't go away until that bone comes back out again.
Can you feel it?
Oh yeah. You know when it goes in there because it...
No, I mean
floating
like
around.
I mean like you like, reach back there. Can you feel it? No.
No, can't feel it. Don't know where it is. Don't even know what happened with it. But it just eventually just goes boop and just jams itself
How
in
often
there.
does that happen?
I haven't had it happen lately. Not that I've done anything like very extreme. I've built a lot of muscle around my back when I did it. Like
Is this through physiotherapy or?
So I did a lot of physio at the start, which was great because at that stage I couldn't do anything. Like when they first sent me home, they sent me home without doing any physio.
The hospital?
Yep. They're like, your physio's in a week. Stay in bed. Do not get up.
Right.
So
Okay.
that was basically. So when I got sent home, I was literally had to go from bed to toilet to lounge, and that was it.
Yeah.
I wasn't allowed to do anything. I wasn't, and it was probably the hardest thing that I ever went through. I couldn't pick my children up.
Yeah.
I wasn't allowed to do anything. And my kids were little at the time. They're like, all they wanted me to do was pick them up. And it fucking killed me because I couldn't pick my children up. I couldn't even hug them because they couldn't sit on me.
Did you anyway?
I did at the end, yeah. I did a lot of things I shouldn't have at the end. Yeah. I went work, started building my van with a partially broken back. But yeah, same thing. Like I had a new appreciation for sneezing.
Oh yeah.
I sneezed for the first time when I got home since breaking my back, and I cried like a girl after I sneezed. And I did not sneeze. I didn't sneeze for like a year after that. If I had to sneeze, I held that fucker in because I still didn't know if it was going to hurt or not.
Oh Christ, yeah, that'd be painful as fuck.
Yeah, and so they sent me to physio, and the physio lady I had was awesome. Like she would only do what I could do, and she's like, "You should be able to do this. Can you do it?" And I'd do it, and she's like, "Does that hurt?" I'm like, "Oh, it does a bit, but it's all right." She's like, "All right, we'll keep pushing." Well, then at some stage, I seen a soccer bike, and I was walking through. I'm like, I hated exercising. because all the way through my career, I never trained. I got a brother that's a personal trainer, owned his own gym. I lived with him for a bit when I was younger. Never used it. My wife's a personal trainer. Never trained. Did the odd here and there just because I felt like it, just to see what was going on. Never trained. And from that day on, from breaking my back, I had a new appreciation for training. They like to me, you can. She said, oh, we'll sit on the stationary cycle block and see how this goes. I got on it, cycled, and she's like, how's it feel? I'm like, I got no pain. She's like, all right, good. She goes, you can't go walking or anything, but you can ride a stationary cycle block because it's no pressure on your spine. So I'd sit there and cycle and cycle and cycle just nonstop, to the point where then she's like, I'll let you go out on a road as long as you don't overdo it. And because all I was allowed to do for months was bed, toilet, bed, toilet. She said, you can ride a cycle bike. So I took that.
Yeah, that's like freedom, isn't it?
And I was fucking out. I was just cycling. I'd cycle every day. I was just cycling around Roma. And it's just...
Getting in the way of all the cars and
basically,
shit. Yeah.
I was like, fuck you. I'm allowed out of the house. You can go around me. So like I did that. And by the time that they said I could start doing physical, like actually lifting things, I fucking hated that cycle bike because I rode it so much because that's all I was allowed to do.
Yeah.
I've never ridden a cycle bike since. I fucking hate it. I sold it after that. But like once they finally cleared me, and like even after I left hospital, I had weekly x-rays to check to make sure it wasn't getting any worse. And it did. It actually compressed another like 20% after leaving hospital. Just from walking, like I wasn't jumping, I wasn't doing stupid shit. It actually compressed more and more. Just the weight of the world, basically, of walking and gravity. It compressed more to the point where each week it compressed less and less and less, to the point where it just stopped compressing anymore. And they're like, we'll do another one in a week's time. If it doesn't get any worse, then that's it. That's how you're going to be. That's how you're going to be. And it did. And they cleared me from that. And they're like, all right, can I go back to doing physical stuff? They're like, yeah, but take it easy. So I started off, and like at this stage, I'm like to the wife, I'm like, I was in a bad place. Like I couldn't sit in a chair because it was killing me, and like I just couldn't do anything. And I was like, I can't live my life like this. Like I couldn't even. I sat down to wire a stereo in my car, and I couldn't sit because the pain's coming up my spine was that excruciating that I couldn't sit there on the ground, like on a chair, and wire something. It was. Did you get
back on any painkillers or anything?
I did have a drama with Nurofen at that stage, which I had to, again, wean myself off that because I got told that I was having way too much of it, which I was, but...
Yeah, it's really bad for your liver.
Yeah, but I had that much pain, I didn't care.
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't give a shit. So,
yeah, so did you see doctors about the pain, or...
They just said it's just how it's going to be. It's just nerve pain.
Should have smoked some weed.
I want to look into about the whole CBD oil. That's what I want to get into, because to this day, I still have pains.
Yeah.
I'll have pains the rest of my life. I've just built up a tolerance to the point of I can deal with it now. I have days.
That's a shit way to live, but
I know. And like I still have days where we walk around and I'll scream. What happened? It's just I just had a shooting pain nothing. Nothing. I just had a shooting pain go through my back and just drops me. Like it literally can drop me to the ground, the pain that it shoots through me.
Fucking bastard.
So like I end up
and what are your alternatives? Like pain wise, you take fucking Endone or Valium or something. Something real shit.
Something that's not good for you. And then I've been down that road before with my first back injury. We've been like on this stuff to deal with the pain. And the same thing, the mental stuff that medication does to you, it fucks you up, something chronic. So again, I after that first one, I knew what that shit done. So I was just going to...
Didn't want to go back there.
Nah, I just wanted to grit through the pain and just do it. Like, my wife didn't see the first back injury stuff that I went through. Like, my parents seen all of that, and like I dealt with a lot of stuff after that. So from the taking all the prescription drugs and then drinking as well, put me into a point where I actually had a seizure driving down a road coming home from a motocross event that I didn't even ride at because I was so sick. I was still hurt. I was driving home. I was just driving, and all of a sudden felt weird and wheeled off the road and had a seizure on the side of the road. And my mate that I was actually went up there with was like 5 minutes behind me, and he was driving along and just seen my car just wheeled off into the bushes and the highway, just still running with my door open. So he found me having a fit on the side of the Logan motorway, and that was like it all went way downhill from there. And like,
Jesus fuck.
my parents got the call from that saying, like my mate called and said, Ryan's on his way to hospital. We don't know what's going on. I found him having a seizure on the side of the road.
And you didn't get any answers from that either, like no cause.
I've had 2 endoscopies done, like cameras down my throat.
Yeah.
Had a look, nothing. Had scans, had CT scans, had MRIs, had heaps of things, and no one can pinpoint it. Like I had another endoscopy done a month ago. They still couldn't figure anything out. Still got no idea.
Yeah, right.
And like I've still got stomach problems. Like I've changed, like of how many diets I've tried. I've done keto. I've done
Vegan still?
Nah,
No.
changed off that. So I found things that don't agree with me. I still can't have milk. And to the point where me and my wife done a fair bit of research that I'm going to a naturopath now that they think I've got a thing called SIBO, which is like a gut disease,
Right.
which would make a lot of sense to the point of why I couldn't keep food down. I couldn't keep water down for a fair part of my life there when I turned to, like when I was on, like having so much Nurofen and all that sort of shit.
Yeah.
It actually
Fucked up your gut biome.
fucked up my stomach. And,
Yeah.
and like when they did the first endoscopy, they figured out that I'd burnt all my stomach lining from one spewing and all the prescription of medication. But still got nothing out of it. It just eventually sort of, again.
Oh, this is what's wrong with you, but see you later.
And then like they back then, like this was, I think it was 2013 I had it done. They just like, it's just something you've done. It just burnt, it'll come good. That's how they left it. Like basically all of anything I've ever had done to me, they're just like, they don't actually give me a cause of the factor. They're just like, this is what's happened, just off you go. Figure it out.
You'll come good eventually.
You'll come good eventually. So I've dealt with that, and like I still, from that day, I still deal with it. Like I
had a similar thing with headaches. Mine was directly diet related, and I went to doctors and everything. They were trying to put me on antibiotics and fucking all this other sort of shit, and these wafer strips to get like painkillers and stuff. I didn't. The antidepressants was the biggest part. Yeah,
I've been on them before.
Yeah. I've actually been on them before as well. But I mean, as soon as I walked in there and told them I had a headache, and I've had it for 2 years, it was like the first thing that the doctor went for. It was the antidepressants. Yeah. So I'm like, I'm gonna try. Well, I didn't actually say that. I came home, spoke with my wife, and she said, "Let's try something different." Yeah. I went to a fucking kinesiologist, and she said, "How's your diet?"
Yeah.
I was like, told her what my diet was like, and she's just like, "You drink far too much caffeine and eat far too much shit.
Yeah.
Change that." And I did, and it was caffeine mainly.
Yeah.
I still drink coffee and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
I just don't drink as much, and headache's gone.
Yeah.
Not once did I get asked that at the doctor's though. Like it was that simple.
They just want to give you any sort of drug that they think will fix it.
Yeah.
Like I was
numb the pain.
Exactly.
You'll come back again later.
Well, that's it. Like that's what they do with me. Like I had a lot of thing with depression after like all these things that went through, and same thing. I went and seen we went and seen therapists and everything, and same thing. They gave me antidepressants and said give it a go.
Yeah.
And like I was out often, so I had no idea. Like I was never one to research anything. I hated school, so I didn't research anything. So I'm like, okay, he's told me to have this, I'll have this.
Yeah, but with a doctor, usually with a doctor, they go to school to do this sort of thing. They should be someone that you can trust.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, it just seems like it's their easy way out.
Exactly.
Antidepressants are all the rage now. So
exactly. And like, I was so much worse off for that. Like, I was depressed, but never once did I think about ending it. And they put me on antidepressants, and it was just a constant thought. Like it became the normal.
Yeah.
I'm like, I was the same thing. I had sat down with my wife. I'm like, this isn't right. I'm like, I shouldn't be having this. I'm like, I've got a wife. I've got a beautiful wife. I'll say that because she is, and 2 beautiful daughters. And here I'm thinking my life's not worth living. I'm like, what is this? I'm like, and the same thing, I just went cold turkey and went off it. And then the doctors called me I had to go in for a reconsult with them. And they're like, oh, do you need a refill? I'm like, no. What do you mean? I'm like, I just stopped taking them. Like, you can't just cold turkey. I'm like, I've been off them for weeks now. Like, you can't do that. I'm like, I've
Well, I
fucking
have.
done it, and like I feel fucking way better for it. So you can jam your fucking shit up your ass. I'm not having it.
Yeah, see, most people experience some sort of depression. It's fairly normal to experience that.
Exactly.
And it's like you don't need a prescription drug to make that go away. You need to deal with
Deal
it.
with it, exactly.
It sounds fucking
Exactly.
harsh and no heart, but
Nah.
it's something that you do have to deal with.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
most people will go through it, and prescription drugs are definitely not the way to fix it.
No.
On the other hand, I personally know people that have gone through it and needed the prescription drugs
each
to
person's
help
different.
them,
Exactly.
but it shouldn't be the first point of call.
Definitely not. Like I was never one to. I'm still not one to talk about my problems. I'll bottle them up until the point where it explodes, and my wife hates me for it because I just don't talk. I just shut down and I just deal with it myself. And my way of dealing with it isn't usually a good way. And like when I went and seen my therapist when I was younger, I was like, "Fuck this! What's this person going to tell me that I don't already know in my own head?" And like I was pushed to do it, and I'm like, and like the hospital made me do it, and I'm like, "Fuck, whatever." I went to it, and by the end of the first session, I was crying in her arms, telling her shit that I've never spoken about. I'm like, and at the end, I'm like, "How the fuck did you do that?" She goes, I just asked and I just listened. And she
You
goes,
what to ask though?
yeah, exactly. And like, still this day, I still won't talk to people.
Yeah.
I won't do it.
Yeah.
I'm that pig-headed that I'll just deal with it myself to the point where I explode, and then
Until you
people,
don't.
and then people have to help because I have no other option. Like, yeah, again, like what I've put my parents through and what I put my wife through, not many people should see that. Like I've had fucking passed out episodes where I'd be playing with my nephew and just completely pass out cold turkey on the ground. And it was, again, they couldn't explain it. I just black out. And like my old man.
So you reckon it's all because of the head
I reckon,
injuries?
Well, see, no one can put it to anything else.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah, well, it does make sense.
Well, it does. Like I've never done anything, like I've never done drugs in my life. So there's, the worst thing I've ever done is drink.
Yeah.
I may have drunk the wrong things, but I've never done drugs, never done any of that sort of stuff. And for me to have the sort of shit that I was going through, it just didn't make sense. And like the only thing I would put it back to was the amount of times I've hit my head on the ground.
Yeah.
And like there's little things I found, like not being able to close my left eye,
Yeah.
like leave one open. It's just the little things. And like and same thing, doctors can't figure it out.
Yeah, well, that's because they're not sporting doctors. I mean, if you went and seen
exactly.
a doctor that specialises with people that play rugby league professionally, they'd probably diagnose you in 10 seconds of you walking in the door.
Exactly. Like I watched a documentary on an NFL player that ended up, I forget what his name was, but he ended up murdering like 3 people. And it was the fact of that he'd had that many head concussions that his brain was just like jelly.
Really?
Yeah, it's on Netflix. I forget what his name is, but it's fucking good to watch. And like, and the thing is, I'm
gonna have to find that.
Yeah, so they put him in jail, and like, and it chilled. They went when they went through it, they put him in jail. Like he signed for I think it was the New England Patriots, had a multi-million-dollar deal, and when he got signed, he basically cold-blooded murdered one of his friends, and they basically charged him with murder and put him into a maximum security prison. And the way he adapted going from a multi-million-dollar mansion to a prison cell, they reckon chilled like seasoned investigators. He just went from like, yeah, I'm good, that's fine. They didn't understand how the fuck he could do it. And then he ended up committing suicide in jail. And then when they did the autopsy on him, when they actually cut his brain apart, they actually found that his brain was like the worst I've ever seen with that. I forget what that they call that when they had the traumatic head injuries over and over and over again. I forget what they call it, but he's the worst one they've ever seen. And he was 24.
Just fucked up.
Just the amount of head knocks just from years and years and years of NFL just running in with his head. So,
Jesus, it makes you wonder about the rugby league players because we don't have the same amount of protection gear.
No, and well, one thing, at least they all lead with their head, but it's still the same thing. There's always head clashes. And
yeah, for sure.
And like motocross is good. Like we've got expensive equipment to have on you. Like my helmet I had on when I did my back was no cheap helmet. It was carbon fiber, and I still smashed the front out of it.
Yeah. You got 156 kilos of steel underneath you, meant to be underneath you.
Yeah, exactly. So like it was at least we've got them sort of precautions in place, but it still doesn't stop the fact you're still hitting the ground hard.
Yeah,
still
sure.
going to ring bells.
Yeah.
So, but
So
yeah.
like, how do you prevent that? Do you have stricter rules for?
You can't prevent it.
No, I understand you can't prevent it unless you stop people from doing it. But I mean, like in your case, like when it first happened, should have you had more scans? Should have you been put through some sort of
Possibly.
testing?
They it should be like what the I think it's NFL do now is they put them on their head knock, like when they have a concussion, they're on on a trial. They've got to pass evaluation to play the next game. But with motocross, if you have a head knock, you can race the next race if you want. If you can cover it up good enough.
Yeah, right.
If you break a bone, they won't let you race. But if you have a head knock or have a concussion, you can race the next race if you can cover it up.
Because you can't see it.
Nope.
So no one cares.
Nope. So when I had my one at the one that I did twice in like when I did in the first corner, then when I woke up and did another one, I actually same thing, got knocked out, and someone actually helped me get on my bike. And like when I went to get on the bike, I put my leg over and fell backwards onto the ground. So I was no way in any shape to ride a bike. But I got back on my bike under my own power and started riding again. I didn't know where the fuck I was.
So what should have happened is not the race should have been stopped, but you should have been stopped.
Correct.
Taken out and fucking scanned and all the rest of it.
There's none of that stuff in motocross. You
just give up.
If you can get back on your bike, you can get back on your bike.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
See, I could understand that would upset a lot of people if they started enforcing that, but
exactly,
shit, that needs to happen.
It's the bad side of it, but it's all the risk we take doing the sport we do.
Yeah, I can appreciate that too. Like, I mean, you like you just said, you went over a jump and you fucked it up and smashed your spine to pieces, exactly. And that is definitely a risk you take. But when it's things like repeated head injuries, when it can be prevented, like if they caught it after the second or the third time that you smashed your brain into the inside of your skull and then they told you to stop or they didn't allow you, might have upset you, but it could you might have been able to blink properly.
Yeah, at least I got a wink in both eyes. But,
you know what I'm saying? Like,
it's in a way there should be more around it, but there's not enough money in our sport to do this sort of stuff. It costs so much as it is. So as soon as you enforce people that can look out for that sort of stuff, racing prices go up. So that I can see why they do it, and I can see why they shoot and why they don't. And it's just
fucked up situation.
It's just part of the sport we race, and I still ride to this day. I still haven't stopped.
Yeah, so that was the next thing I was going to ask you. Are you still riding?
Yeah, I rode for the first time so I think I broke my back in March 2018. Yeah, it must be 18. I rode for the first time last month since March 2018.
2 years.
Yeah. And I was fucking shit scared.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
There was a jump that was about the same size as the one I broke my back. I jumped every other jump on the track that was way bigger. Would not jump that.
Oh, yeah?
I ended up jumping at the end, but I was just fucking proper shit scared. But I ended up riding, so I was on 4-week rosters. I rode every weekend until I went back to work. And by the time I went back to work, I was comfortable again on a bike.
Yeah.
Basically, it's never going to be the same. Jumps still scare me. I still won't do the sort of shit that I used to on jumps. But I can ride a bike well enough to warrant that I used to race professionally for a while.
Yeah.
But
so you're not competitive now, though?
No. I got told by my parents when I got the bike that I wasn't allowed to race this year. Uh-huh. But
this
year, because I know if they said it all, it wouldn't happen. So I don't know what sort of scale I'll probably race at, but I would like to race again. So possibly next year. Now working back at home, I possibly could do that now, but I don't know to what extent because I want to get my kids into it, and they didn't see me ride up until a month ago, and they just turned 5. They've never seen me ride, and it was my life before I had them. Even when I had them, I was still racing, but they can't really remember it because they were babies.
Yeah.
And they never knew I raced. They seen photos of me and they're like, "Oh, who's that? Is that Uncle Trent?" I'm like, "No, Don, that's Dad. Dad used to race too." "Oh, did ya?" I'm like, "Yeah, Dad hurt himself. That's why he doesn't race." So they just didn't understand.
Yeah, and they won't until they're older.
No, and like they sort of. I bought them a bike when they were 3, and they're now 5, and they've only last month started riding it.
Yeah, right.
Because they just didn't. I couldn't teach them because they couldn't watch me ride. I wasn't allowed to ride a bike. I didn't have a bike to ride for starters. I was in that much financial debt that I couldn't afford to buy a bike, and yeah, they just didn't want to do it. They weren't interested because to them it wasn't our life.
Yeah.
But it was for so many years, even for their mum. Like she raced all the way up until I met her, and we had our two daughters at the start. But yeah, same thing. They've never seen her ride either because she hasn't ridden since.
So is the wife going to get back into riding? Or
she wants to.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just had another daughter, so I think once she grows up and isn't breastfeeding again, I reckon she'll probably ride again.
Another year.
Yep. So we'll get her back into it.
Yeah, that's good.
So yeah, but
holy fuck! I didn't know. Obviously, we worked together. I knew about your back and all that. I didn't know all the ins and outs. So
the break in the back wasn't even the worst part. It was the mental shit that went with it.
And quite often is.
It definitely is. Like, I'm not going to say the back wasn't bad. Like it's still bad, but the mental side that put me through is forever changed my life. Like I did this day,
but like I said, no one can see it, so no one really cares.
Like I'll always not saying I didn't care about people when I was younger, but I see people so much differently now. Like if I see someone going through something, before I judge them, now it's like you got to step back.
Yeah, you're a fucking idiot. There's nothing wrong with saying that. Everyone is younger.
Exactly.
If anyone says they're not an idiot as they're young, they're still an idiot.
Yeah, and like so now I'll take the time to try and help where I can. Like most of the time I can't help, and I'm probably dealing with a lot more shit. Not saying it's worse than what they are, but I'm probably dealing with a lot of shit too. But I'll always put them in front of me. Like I'll deal with my stuff behind closed doors because that's how I do it.
But you also know that what they're going through.
I know what it feels like exactly. And it was a big turning point in my life. That whole breaking my back and going through all that changed a lot of things. Like
better for it. Not going to say like obviously you're injured.
I'm a better person for it.
Yeah,
I'm a much better person for it. I appreciate a lot more things now than I used to. Like money, me and my wife used to stress about money, something chronic. We still do, but I've lived with nothing. So I'm a lot less stressed about money now. Like I used to be not sleeping at all because I was stressed that how the fuck am I paying rent next week? And
who gives a fuck? It'll sort itself out.
Yeah, and at the end, that's the mindset I got into is I'm still alive. They can kick me out of my house, and I'll figure something else out. But like, I think the biggest thing, because like same thing, I went through all the depression, and they tried to put me in antidepressants. They tried all this shit, and I actually turned to the gym for the first time in my life.
Yeah, the gym's good.
That's what I said before. I hated the gym. I do the odd boot camp with my brother, and I try that hard to beat everyone that I end up would because I was naturally fit, but then I'd be fucked for the next 4 days. I couldn't do anything. But like I turned to the gym, and they're like, and like with the pain I was going through my back, I went to my physio. I'm like, what can I do? I'm like, I can't live in this pain for the rest of my life. And she goes, the only way to go through to fix anything is build a muscle around it. So I went from the day they cleared me to lift things, I went 7 days a week, sometimes 2 times a day in the gym. And I did that for over a year.
Is this under the guidance of your physio? Or?
Once they finally cleared me that nothing was going to change. I did that cycling for however long they told me I couldn't do weight bearing.
Yeah.
And then when they finally cleared me, and like I'd stepped away from my physical job at this stage and moved into other avenues because I couldn't do it. Like I went back to work, couldn't do it. But I was 7 days a week in the gym, and I went, like 2 days, and I was eating. Like I was eating at some stages, like people that I used to work with are like, how the fuck do you do it? I was eating chicken and rice 4 times a day, and that was all I'd eat. And it was literally, I'd have brekkie, and I'd have oats and something, and like a shake for breakfast, and I'd have chicken and rice portioned out in certain sizes every other meal for that. And I did that for months on end. And like when I finally was allowed to get up and walk, I was probably 65 kilos. So there was I was just basically a skin and bone.
Yeah.
And by the time that I probably got a year or so into it and sort of tapered back on my gym, I went from 65 kilos to 82 kilos. So I, in a year, gained 20 kilos of, wasn't fat, like I was training that hard that it, I gained that much muscle. And like I went from couldn't stand or sit with excruciating back pain to being able to deadlift like 130 kilos and rack pull like 170 for a person that broke their back. And people still can't figure out how the fuck I can physically do it. And like and it just got to the point where
Determination, you put the work in.
Exactly, like that. Yeah, okay, that part of the bone is fucked. But I obviously built that much muscle around it that all that muscle took over the pain of what it would put the stress on that bone. And like it didn't hurt. And like my wife was like, "You sure you can do it?" I'm like, "It just doesn't hurt." I'm like, I'm good. Like I started doing everything. I was doing everything. I just got that addicted to it because it stopped the pain. So
It's definitely addictive.
I just didn't stop. Like I'd get to the point where I was like 8 o'clock at night, and I'm like, I'm in the gym for the second time. I was like, I'm going to the gym, and I'd be there for an hour, and I'd just punch it out, and I'd come home, and that was my day. Like I just didn't know any different, and I just give up, and it ended up costing me dearly too. Like it put me into adrenal fatigue. So I dealt with a lot of.
Who told you that?
A lot of different people have told me that. I don't believe it was adrenal fatigue. There's some sort of fatigue that I run myself into the ground that I couldn't.
So your adrenal glands are more than capable of pumping more adrenaline every single day for 2 lifetimes without dying, without frizzling out.
Well, that obviously again, that's what they thought I'd done because I had no excuse for why I was so tired. And same thing, just started losing all this stuff I'd worked so much on gaining, all just started just fizzling away.
Yeah.
And I couldn't play. Like I was doing the same thing. I was still eating. I was still training. And I wasn't. I'd fucked up so much shit that I wasn't sleeping. So I was getting like.
Oh, so you weren't sleeping, but it wasn't the sleep. It was adrenal fatigue.
Yeah. So like I wasn't sleeping a great deal. I haven't for a long time, just from all the shit that has happened in my body. I just can't sleep. Even to this day. Like I'll go to bed at 11 o'clock and I'll wake up at 3 thinking it's time to wake up.
Try meditating.
I did start on that, and it did help. But I, again, got busy and lost it all.
Yeah.
And it's hard with doing all the work I was doing to meditate and still have time to talk to my family.
Yeah.
And probably won't be so bad now that I'm home. I could probably get into it. But I have found, with the short amount of stuff that I've done with meditating, I have slept so much better after meditating.
Yeah.
So much better. Even if like I lay down and I fall asleep meditating, I sleep that night so much better.
Yep.
But
Do it. 20 minutes. That's all you need.
yeah. So.
But anyways, I'm going to fucking call it because the kids are going to be home in like 15 minutes. Fuck that.
Don't want that shit.
No, fuck that. Thanks for coming on.
That's right.
Appreciate it.
I just carried on for a while.
No, that's good. It's good to catch up too.
Yeah, it was good.
So Instagram, Facebook, all your shit, your fucking Build It page that you've got going. Tell us about it.
I actually changed that now.
Yeah,
so
right.
it's so my business one is actually called Maher Media now. So I changed it all from that because.
Can you spell that?
So it's Maher and then just media spelled the same way, and I think it's Maher Media Co. So that's just all one word, Maher Media Co. in Instagram and Facebook.
What are you doing there?
So I'm starting getting into a lot of trying to get into the photography and a lot of videography sort of stuff. So with my kids doing stuff, just trying to document like all my writing and all that sort of stuff, and just trying to get into something different, get my mind into something else. So
Yeah, cool.
just trying to work on it. Just
Yeah, that's awesome.
My editing stuff is I'm getting there. So it's not an easy thing to learn overnight. So
Nope.
I've lacked on the media, on the content side of it, just with working away so much, but starting to get a bit more into it, and we're actually in the works of starting a clothing line. So
Yeah, nice.
I'm in the middle of designing our shirts at the moment. So between trying to do the video and photos and that, I haven't got a great deal of spare time, and having a new 4-month-old daughter doesn't leave you a great deal of time to do that sort of stuff. But I'm going to try and do a lot more of it in the coming months now that I'm got a bit more free time. I'm home each night. So
Yeah, that sounds good. Enjoy it.
I will. Something different.
Yeah, definitely.
new avenues, fun times.
All right. Thanks again.
That's right. Thanks for having me.
No worries. That's him. All right. Thanks very much, guys, for tuning in. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, Instagram, all that good shit. And just keep it real.